This is the cannon that I just used. It uses commands to summon a ton of boats all in one spot, which then apply a ton of knockback to the player when they try to fly into it. This right here is only about 100 boats, and the clip you saw at the start is about 750. For my tests, I've seen that anything above about 400 boats is supersonic, that is, above 343 blocks per second. We're going to see what it takes to stop this player, from cobwebs to powdered snow, to honey, to even something like water. This first test is going to be a control with 500 boats. You can see my coordinates in the top left, and my speed in blocks per second in the bottom left. Since both the coordinates and the speedometer are a bit small and might be hard to see, I'm going to put some important information on screen in editing. In my hotbar, I've gathered a couple of items that I think have the power to stop the player, and I've ordered them from weakest to strongest. At least, this is what I think. I have not tested them. That's what this video is for. And, also, we can do some interesting calculations to see how many Gs the player would be experiencing, and whether they would be able to survive any of these. First test, water. About 100 blocks in front of the cannon, I've set out a strip of 50 blocks of water, which I think should be more than enough to stop it. But let's find out. I'm going to be doing this first test with 250 boats, but we can jump up to 500 or 750 or even 1,000 to see how much water we really need to stop some insane speeds. Alright, first test. 250 boats versus 50 blocks of water. I'm going to make a prediction and say that it's going to go through 10 blocks of water. Oh wow, okay. That actually made it through with pretty easily, actually. Wow. Okay. Well, let's try some more water. Alright, I've now doubled the amount of water to 100 blocks, and I just can't see this getting through. Okay, yeah. It still had a ways to go. That was like, what, 60 blocks? Alright, let's try this again, but with more boats. How about 500 this time? There we go, 501. Alright, considering that 250 boats made it just over halfway through the 100, I think that 500 should just barely make it through all of it. Let's see. Yeah. That was actually way more than just barely. That breezed right through it. Just for fun, I decided to figure out how many Gs of force the player just experienced with this test and the previous one, and according to some online calculator I found, the player just experienced 113 Gs of force, which would be completely fatal. And for the previous one with 250 boats, it would be about 50 Gs, which would still be fatal, most likely. Okay, I'm going to do one final test with the water before I move on to something else, that being 750 boats versus 200 blocks of water. There we go. And there we go, 200 blocks of water. Alright, let's go right for it. I think that it's going to just barely not go through it, but let's see. Oh, wow, okay, that was the most just barely of just barely. That was barely made it through. I think if we added one more block of water, that would probably not have made it through. That was so close. Alright, the next item on my list that I wanted to test was sweet berries. This is going to take a little bit of Axiom shenanigans to get in here because normally it's supposed to be placed on grass, but if I turn on no updates and then break the grass, it'll float, and then I can just stack them. I think this is going to be just a little bit stronger than the water, so I'm going to just immediately put out a 100 block strip of sweet berries. In spirit of not having this video be 5 hours long, I'm just going to immediately start at 500 boats. Okay, there we go. Oh, we can immediately go and test this, I guess. I think it's going to make it all the way through. And it did not make it all the way through. Oh wow, that actually really did not make it through all that much. That was a lot stronger than I thought. Okay. Just for fun, I once again put the data we got into the G-force calculator, and it said the force was just over 1,000 Gs, so that would probably be absolutely fatal and you're most likely no longer in one piece. Alright, because of how few sweet berries we made it through, I'm just gonna go directly to 1,000 boats, which is just about the maximum that my computer can handle. Alright, there we go. We're down to about 20 frames per second, but should be good enough to do this quick experiment. Alright, let's go. I think this is still not going to make it through, but I think we're going to get through about 50 sweet berries probably. Yep, that looks like about half. Alright, so in conclusion, the sweet berries were a lot stronger than I thought. For the next test, I'm going to be doing honey, which I'm going to do by just replacing all of the walls right here with honey blocks. Also, a satisfying way to get rid of all the sweet berries. So, I placed these third in my hotbar, which meant that I thought these were going to be just a little bit stronger than the sweet berries. Now that I saw how strong the sweet berries actually were, I really doubt that the honey is going to be stronger, but we can still try to find out. Alright, that's 200 blocks of honey. Once again, like with the sweet berries, I'm just going to start at 500 boats to keep the length of the video in check. Alright, let's go for it. Okay, I think I see what happens. So that looks like it just stopped me, but since honey is not a full block, basically what happens is I just ran out of honey and crashed into these blocks right here since the hitbox is slightly larger. So the honey actually didn't stop me and it looked like it actually barely even slowed me down. I don't know, maybe let's just go to like 500, which that should be enough to slow me down. There we go. Okay, now let's go for this. Okay, wow, that did pretty much the same thing, but now for 500 blocks instead of 200. Wow, the honey actually really seems to not be all that strong. Okay, so I've now bumped it up to 2,500 blocks of honey, which should be farther than the 500 boats should even be capable of sending me. So we should at the very least get some sort of result here. Okay, let's go. Okay, that seems to just be doing absolutely nothing. I think in editing I'm gonna have to put a side-by-side comparison with this and just regular walls because, yeah, that seems to have just done absolutely nothing. Okay, yeah, here I am in editing, and you can see there's just absolutely no difference between the two clips, so I think the honey really just didn't do anything, which was surprising, but now we know. So, in conclusion, the honey did absolutely nothing, and I am absolutely terrible at making predictions for these. So, next on the list of things I wanted to test was weeping vines, which is actually a little bit of an interesting one. So, this one, I really hope we're just gonna have an interesting result, but considering how bad I've been at predicting what's gonna happen with these, I'm just gonna be safe and lay down like 300 blocks of these, but I don't think we're gonna need that many. At least I hope we don't need that many. And then you know the drill by now. I'm just gonna summon 500 boats and start with that. Okay, 500 boats summoned, and now let's just go for it. Well, that's kind of sad. Okay, yeah, my predictions are just really, really bad. Okay, is that just gonna be another honey situation? That didn't stop anything. Okay. Okay, like with the honey, I'm just gonna extend this to be like 1 or 2,000 blocks long to make sure there isn't just some tiny little effect that isn't noticeable with only 300 blocks. Okay, this is like 1,500 blocks. Seeing what it did with 300, I'm not sure this is really gonna have any substantial effect, but let's see. Yeah, it's just not doing anything. Okay. Yeah, that was like 1,300 blocks. Yeah, that did nothing. Okay, well, that's like 3 for 3 that I made just absolutely terrible predictions for, but we're going to be doing powdered snow next, and that I really think is going to have a major effect, so we should at least get some sort of interesting result with that. Okay, how about like 100 blocks of powdered snow? That should be good. There we go, exactly 100 blocks. And let's go test. This is with the same amount of boats, 500. So let's see. Yeah, that did stop. That was a similar result to the sweet berries. It got through like 20 blocks with 500 boats. Okay, so with 500 boats, it made it through about 22 or 23 blocks of snow. And if it made it through that many with 500 boats, we can guess that if we double the amount of boats to 1,000, it will roughly double the distance we get through the snow. So I've shortened this to 45 blocks, so if we get exactly 1,000 boats, it should just barely make it through, or just barely not make it through. Let's see which one it is. And there we go, 1,000 boats. Once again, okay, this is some major lag right there. Hopefully the recording is fine. Okay, let's go for it. What happened there? That just like, I think it fully dead stopped, but I ended up getting right out of the snow, so then I started accelerating. But it seems like it kind of like stopped me right here, and I had just barely the amount it started pulling me out of it. So it looked like it was pretty much just even, like this was right about the stopping distance right here. Very interesting. Please give me my frames back. Okay, there we go. Next test is going to be Cobwebs, which I think is probably going to be even stronger than the snow, if that's even possible, but from what I know from Minecraft, Cobwebs are better at stopping players than powdered snow, so assuming that holds up for these tests, I probably only need to lay down like 25 blocks for a 500 boat test. Let's see if this makes it through. Okay, let's go test it. Well, that did not make it all the way through. That was like, oh wow, that was significantly stronger. That was like 8 blocks. That was a lot stronger than the powdered snow. Okay, so if it was like 8 blocks for 500 boats, then it should just barely get through like 15 blocks with 1,000 boats. So let me lay down 15 blocks. Okay, well that's 15 blocks. And now let's get 1,000 boats. Okay, and now let's go test it. Oh, well, here was the opposite thing of the powdered snow where it just barely made it through. Here was like 1 block off. You know what, honestly, I think I would be curious if I... Wow, this is really laggy. I'd be curious if I remove this last layer right here, would it have a similar effect with the powdered snow where it like kind of stops but then re-accelerates afterwards? I'd be curious. Let me see. No, it just got barely stopped right here. Okay. What? I think I was recording that. That was weird. I was trying to record a shot of being sent out with the 1,000 bows to make a shot for the conclusion, but I think I got sent out of the cannon because I fell into it at the wrong angle. Okay. So ignoring what just happened, In conclusion, I got 50% of the items correct on what happened, those being the water, powdered snow, and cobwebs, being roughly able to predict what would happen, which wasn't exactly what happened with the sweet berries, honey, and vines. This was a bit of a fun experiment, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.